This episode was produced using AI-generated voices and scripting. All right, here's a question I want you to sit with. When was the last time a technology went from "that'll never work" to "oh wait, it's everywhere"? And you completely missed the transition.
That's the whole game right now with autonomous vehicles. People are still debating whether self-driving cars are safe. And meanwhile, Waymo just quietly crossed 250,000 paid rides per week.
Wait, seriously? 250,000 rides a week?
Yeah, and that number's been roughly doubling year over year. They were at 100,000 weekly trips back in late 2023. So we're not talking about a pilot program anymore. We're talking about a transit system.
Okay, but let me push on that. 250,000 rides a week sounds huge until you compare it to Uber doing like 25 million rides a day globally. So is this actually mainstream, or is this a rounding error with good PR?
Both, and I mean that sincerely. It's a rounding error in terms of total rideshare volume, obviously. But here's what matters. It's a rounding error that's growing at a rate that should terrify every incumbent. The slope of that curve is the story, not the current number.
So you're saying don't look at the snapshot, look at the trajectory.
Exactly. And think about where they're operating. This isn't some geo-fenced parking lot demo. San Francisco, Phoenix, Los Angeles, Austin. These are real cities with real traffic and real chaos. They just got approved for expansion in Atlanta and Miami. Every new city they enter, ridership jumps almost immediately.
Which brings up my first contrarian take, and I think you might actually agree with me here. The biggest thing holding back self-driving taxis isn't the technology anymore. It's not even regulation, it's vibes.
Oh, 100%. And this is the part nobody talks about. The technology has been good enough for a while now. Waymo's safety record is genuinely impressive. Significantly fewer crashes per mile than human drivers. The data's there. But people don't make decisions based on data. They make decisions based on whether they saw a weird TikTok of a Waymo blocking a fire truck.
Right. One viral video of a confused robotaxi sitting at a green light does more damage than 1,000 safe trips do good.
And that asymmetry is wild. Think about it. If a human Uber driver rear-ends someone, that's Tuesday. If a Waymo does it, it's a congressional hearing. We hold autonomous systems to a standard we would never hold humans to, and I'm not sure that's rational.
I mean, is it irrational, though? There's something different about being harmed by a machine versus being harmed by a person. Like, psychologically, it hits different.
Sure, it hits different. I'll grant you that. But if the goal is fewer dead people, and I think that should be the goal, then the math is pretty clear. About 40,000 people die on US roads every year. The vast majority of those are human error. Distraction, impairment, fatigue. A system that's even marginally better than humans saves thousands of lives. But we're letting the perfect be the enemy of the dramatically better.
Okay, I want to come back to the safety argument because I think there's something slippery in it. But first, let's talk about what's actually driving this ridership growth. Why are people getting in these cars?
This is my favourite part. It's not because people love technology. It's not because they're early adopters who want to live in the future. It's because the experience is genuinely better in ways that are almost embarrassingly mundane.
Like what?
No small talk, no weird air freshener, no driver on the phone, no passive-aggressive route disputes. The car is clean, it's quiet, you get in, you go. And this is key. The pricing is becoming competitive. In some markets, they're already at Uber X rates, and Waymo's been running promotions that undercut it.
So the killer feature of the self-driving taxi is introversion?
Don't laugh. That's legitimately part of it. There's survey data showing that women in particular feel safer in a Waymo than in a rideshare with a stranger. No driver who knows where you live. No driver who's going to rate you or get weird. Just a car that takes you where you're going.
That's actually a really compelling point. And I want the listener to think about this. When's the last time you got into a rideshare and felt even slightly uncomfortable? Even just mildly? A wrong turn argument, an overly chatty driver when you're exhausted, whatever. Now imagine that friction just doesn't exist.
And on the flip side, and this is something I think the pro-Waymo crowd doesn't grapple with enough, there are people who depend on that small talk. There are drivers for whom this is their livelihood. We can't just hand-wave the labour displacement.
Thank you. That's where I wanted to go. Because every time I see these ridership numbers celebrated, I think, celebrated by whom? If you're one of the 4 million rideshare drivers in the US, this graph going up is your income going down.
Yeah, and the standard tech industry response is, well, new jobs will be created, which historically is true in aggregate, but is cold comfort to the specific person whose job evaporated. A 55-year-old Uber driver in Phoenix isn't going to become an autonomous vehicle engineer.
So how do you hold both of those things? Genuinely. How do you say this technology is better and safer while also acknowledging it's going to hurt a lot of people?
I think you have to be honest that those are both true at the same time and stop pretending one cancels out the other. The technology is better, and it will cause real pain. That's not a contradiction, that's just reality. The question is what we do about the pain, not whether we pretend the technology away.
All right, here's my second contrarian take, and I think this one's going to get me in trouble. I don't think Waymo is the company that wins this long term.
Oh, that's spicy. Go.
Waymo's spent, what, billions? Maybe north of 10 billion over the life of the project going back to Google's self-driving car days. They're the clear leader right now, but they're running a hardware-heavy, city-by-city rollout with custom sensor suites on every vehicle. Meanwhile, Tesla's shipping software updates to millions of cars that are already on the road.
Okay, I hear you. And you're wrong, but in an interesting way.
Come on!
No, listen, the Tesla approach, camera only, fleet learning, massive data advantage, it sounds compelling on paper. And Elon's been promising full self-driving next year since 2016. It's practically a meme at this point. Tesla's supervised FSD is impressive as a driver assist. It is not a robo-taxi. That's a canyon of difference, not a gap.
But doesn't scale eventually win? If Tesla cracks level 4 autonomy with just cameras and software, they can deploy to every Tesla on the road overnight. Waymo has to physically put cars in cities one fleet at a time.
That if is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Waymo's approach works today, it's proven. They have a commercial service with paying customers and a safety record you can audit. Tesla has a promise and a timeline that keeps slipping. I'd rather bet on the company that's already doing the thing than the one that says they will any day now.
Fair. But I still think there's a version of this where Waymo is like BlackBerry, first and best, right up until they weren't.
Maybe. But BlackBerry's problem was that the iPhone redefined the category. For Tesla to be the iPhone here, they need to actually ship a product that works without a human behind the wheel, and they haven't.
Yet?
Yet, sure, yet.
All right, let's talk about something else that I think gets undercovered. The second-order effects. If autonomous taxis actually go mainstream, like truly mainstream, not just tech city mainstream, what changes?
Everything. And I don't say that lightly. Start with car ownership. If you can summon a clean, affordable ride in under 5 minutes at any hour, why do you own a car? Especially a second car. The average American car sits parked 95% of the time. That's an insanely expensive paperweight.
So you think car sales drop?
In cities, eventually, dramatically. And that cascades. Fewer cars means less need for parking. You know how much urban land is dedicated to parking in American cities? It's something like 30% in some downtown areas. Imagine reclaiming even a fraction of that for housing or parks or literally anything else.
Okay, I want the listener to actually picture that for a second. Your city's downtown. A third of it is parking lots and garages. Now, imagine half of that just opens up. That's not a transportation story. That's an urban planning revolution.
And it goes further. Insurance industry gets upended. If the car's driving itself and the manufacturer there is liable, what happens to personal auto insurance? That's a multi-hundred-billion-dollar industry. DUI law changes, road design changes. Even real estate values shift, because suddenly living 30 minutes from downtown is a different experience when you're not the one driving.
That last one is interesting. The commute doesn't get shorter, but it gets more productive, or at least less miserable.
Right. And some people think that actually makes sprawl worse, not better. If the ride is pleasant and you can work during it, people might be willing to live even further out, which means more driving, more energy use, more spread. So the urbanist utopia isn't guaranteed. It could go either way.
That's a great point. Self-driving cars could make cities denser, or they could make them more sprawling, and we genuinely don't know which way it tips.
We don't, and anyone who tells you they do is selling something.
Let me circle back to the safety argument, because I promised I would. You said earlier that Waymo's safety record is significantly better than human drivers. But here's what bugs me about that framing. How do we know the comparison is apples to apples?
It's a fair question.
Waymo operates in specific cities, in specific conditions, with extensive mapping. They don't drive in snowstorms. They don't drive on unmapped rural roads. Comparing their crash rate to the national average, which includes drunk teenagers on back roads at 2 a.m., feels like comparing a spelling bee champion to the national average literacy rate.
Okay, that's a good analogy, and it's partly right. The operating conditions are more controlled. But here's the counter. Waymo's also driving in San Francisco, which is one of the most chaotic driving environments in America. Double-parked cars, cyclists, construction, pedestrians jaywalking, steep hills with no visibility. It's not like they picked a flat grid in Kansas.
True.
And they did publish a peer-reviewed study with Swiss Re, the reinsurance giant, not exactly a pro-tech hype machine, showing their crash rates were substantially lower than human baselines in their operating areas. Same roads, same conditions. So the comparison isn't perfect, but it's not junk either.
Fine, I'll give you that. But here's my deeper concern, and I think this applies to you, the listener, too. Are we ready for a world where a machine kills someone and there's no one to blame? Because that's coming. A Waymo will eventually be in a fatal accident. Statistically, it's inevitable, and when it happens, who goes to jail?
Nobody. And that's going to be incredibly difficult for people to accept. We have a deep psychological need to assign blame to a person. A corporation can pay a fine, but you can't put an algorithm in prison. And I think that tension, the gap between what's statistically optimal and what feels just, is going to be one of the defining ethical questions of this decade.
That's the part nobody talks about.
And it's why I think the just look at the safety data argument, while correct, is incomplete. You need the data, and you need a framework for accountability that people trust. We don't have the second part yet.
Okay, let's bring this to a landing. Or at least to a provocation. If you had to bet, 5 years from now, what does the rideshare landscape actually look like?
5 years. Waymo's in 20 plus US cities. They've probably expanded internationally. Tokyo, maybe parts of the Middle East where the regulatory environment is more permissive. Uber and Lyft have cut deals to integrate autonomous vehicles into their platforms. Uber's already doing this with Waymo in some markets. Tesla has maybe launched a limited robo-taxi service, but it's smaller than people expect. And the average person in a major American city has taken at least one autonomous ride.
And the drivers?
Still around, but the economics are squeezing. The high-volume urban rides go autonomous first. Drivers get pushed toward the routes and times that robots can't handle yet. Suburbs, bad weather, complex pickups. It's a slow bleed, not a cliff, but the direction is unmistakable.
Here's what I'd say to the listener. You probably haven't taken a ride in a Waymo yet, and because you haven't, this whole thing feels abstract, like it's happening to other people in other cities. But that window of "this doesn't affect me" is closing a lot faster than you think. The question isn't whether autonomous taxis are coming to your city. It's what changes when they do.
And whether you've thought about it before they get there, because the companies have. The city planners mostly haven't. And the average person definitely hasn't.
So think about it now. That's the homework.
Since when do we give homework?
Since today, we're evolving, just like the taxis.
That was terrible.
I know, but we're done. Thanks for listening, everybody.